Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Today we are going to be doing the April reading wrap-up with a puzzle included, but these are all of the books that I have completed so far in the month of April. Let's get into it. I started the month with my book club pick, and that was A Room with a View by E.M. Forrester. The characters in this are so accessible, and what I think makes this so timeless. A lot of people are going to be able to find relatability in these characters, even though this has taken place over 100 years ago in the early 1900s in Italy. We have the character of Lucy, who is a misunderstood young girl and finds solace in music. There is Cecil, who's a bit of a smart aleck. He thinks his activism makes him better than everybody else. But Mr. Emerson was my favorite character. Very blunt. I think they used the word contrite to describe him, and that was just so fun and funny to read. The atmosphere was my favorite part, though. The color that I would use to describe this book would be golden. It's like looking back at those summers of your youth, and it's just such a warm, bubbly feeling inside. Nostalgic would be a word that I would use to describe this book. Obviously, I did not live back then, but it makes me think of my teenage years. I don't know how old these characters necessarily are, but if you know the song I Melt With You, that is another one that I think fits perfectly for this book. Writing is a little bit long-winded. I did do this on the audiobook, and if you don't have a library card, the audiobook is fairly cheap on Audible. I do recommend checking that out if you are not somebody who really likes descriptive writing, because that did make the reading experience faster for me. But there were several thought-provoking paragraphs in here that I didn't really expect out of a classic, but a lot of those ideas were going to the masses in this time period. I didn't expect all the political talk in this book, like socialism and radicalism, but knowing when it was published, it does make sense, as a lot of politics and governments were changing around the world at this time period, and we were even headed towards the First World War, and I was kind of thinking about that, of what happens to these characters when the Great War takes place. Overall, this is a story about being young and a love letter to youth and how that shapes us into the person that we become. I think if you're a fan of The White Lotus, this would be the classic to check out, because one of the plot lines in season 2 of The White Lotus is so reminiscent of one of the plot lines in this book. I couldn't really find anything online other than people being like, if you like The White Lotus, you'll like this. I haven't found anything in depth, but I cannot stop thinking about it. Maybe I should do a Reddit post, but I've been getting in trouble in the bookish subreddits lately. We will not be getting into that here, but this was a good book. Next, we have my graphic novel pick of the month. I like to read one graphic novel a month, and this month was Good Talk, A Memoir and Conversations by Mira Jacobs. If you can see the little sticker here, it is the New York Times Book Review 100 Notable Books of 2019. This is really explaining what it is like to be a mother in this tumultuous time period that we're living in. I've always wondered, ever since I went through a kind of, I don't want to say traumatic experience, but after I witnessed something that is so prevalent in our time period, it made me wonder, how do parents explain these crazy things that happen in our world to their kids? Like, I wouldn't even know where to begin. And in this book, we see it of, it's a trial and error process. Sometimes Mira's like, oh, am I telling my son too much? Am I not telling him enough? Should I even be telling him anything at all? Because it's not even like they're making him watch the news or anything like that. It's just hearsay. Like, you hear things all over the place. I mean, I remember elections in my youth of hearing about different political figures, but I don't think I heard as much as kids would hear nowadays because of the prevalence of the internet and social media, and we're just divided like more than ever. And we're seeing how Mira takes that on, as she is the child of immigrants. She never realized that she had experienced racism until she started dating a guy in high school who was like, hey, are you not picking up on this? Now, she did experience colorism when she would go back to India to visit her family there, but she was like, that was only in India. Nothing ever like that happened in America. So seeing her come to terms with racism in this country and how it's always been a thing in this country, and how she is going to raise a child in somewhere that where people are going to look down on him because of who he is as a person, And this was just a powerful story of motherhood and motherhood in the modern times that we live in. We're going to talk about the book that probably surprised me the most out of these, and that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. In my vlog where I read this, I have my live reaction to the ending. I was not expecting it at all. I do love these characters. Oh, this is a great cast of characters, and I was really scared because we're introduced to a bunch of guys who are working on a ranch, and I was like, oh no, they're probably going to be interchangeable, but they all have their purpose for being there in the story. I think a lot of times we see authors as having an excess of characters, when this is like each person is there for a reason and has that impact on the story. The characters, we had George. He is he's like rough to the edges, but I think this really shows that you can't judge somebody by their outside appearance. And we have another book in this vlog that or not in this vlog, in this video, that has a similar theme of you can't judge people by how they look on the outside, because then you have Lenny, who is a really big guy. You would think he's just all rough and tough, but no, he really is this sweet guy who he just wants a little animal, the bunnies. The atmosphere, it's not as atmospheric as East of Eden, but knowing when this book was published, it's so fitting as we are in the 1930s, and it was a rough time for people out there, and especially in these rural farming communities in California, of people are just trying to survive and to make ends meet. And again, I think that's something that can be very relatable to the times that we are living in. The writing style is very symptomatic. Steinbeck, one of his best qualities, because I do think he is the American writer, he starts a scene and how he ends a scene is so symptomatic, and I can picture it so well. I love their writing style, and if I ever write fiction that takes place in America, John Steinbeck is probably going to be my biggest inspiration for writing. Overall, this is a story about loneliness, and it had me thinking about the old times that we live in. I always hear that there is a loneliness epidemic, and I truly believe that with all my heart, that people are just so lonely nowadays. And to see that when this was happening in the 1930s, it made me wonder, is there economic reasons, socioeconomic reasons of why we go through these phases of loneliness? Now, there's always been lonely people, but this is taking place during the Great Depression, and if we look at now, I think y'all all know, if you're in the United States, how the economy is looking, and I know from friends overseas that the prices are very high pretty much everywhere. So does that stem to our relationships with other people? This was a very thought-provoking piece that if I read this at another time, would I be having the same thoughts comparing it to our modern times that we are currently living? The next book I have to talk about was a mood read, and that is Stolen Beauty by Lori Lico Albanese. This one I have a very complicated relationship with. With our characters, I did not know they were based on real people until the end of the book, but I'm really uncomfortable with some of the fictionalized plot points that the author inserted into the story. With our character in the more modern timeline, Maria, she is a newlywed. The Nazis invade her home of Austria, and she happens to be Jewish as well. And we're just getting trauma after trauma after trauma, traumatic event after traumatic event with her character. And come to find out by the end of the book, some of that stuff didn't actually happen in real life. That makes me feel really uneasy, because there were already terrible things that happened to her being a Jewish woman in a country that the Nazis have invaded. I don't think I need to say any more. That is so totally awful. And then you're going to add in all this other stuff that didn't actually happen. I think it takes away from what was actually happening to people like Maria in the 1940s. I don't know why the author chose to have these plot points in the book. I think we could have the same story without having those plot points. Then we have our character of Adele, who I did not feel for in the slightest, because there was a lot of cheating in that plot line. Again, we don't have total confirmation if any of this actually happened, and I didn't feel for her. The way things were justified and her plot points, I'm very sad of how these women were depicted in this book. But as for the atmosphere, this was definitely a love letter to Vienna. There was fantastic world building. I never realized Vienna was such a cultural hub. I mean, it was basically the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, so I don't know why I would have never thought of that. Our character, I think it was Adele, Vienna is better than Rome, than Paris, Florence, cultural hubs. And so Vienna was just kind of that. I see a lot of comparisons to Florence, Italy, but this is in the 1900s and late 1800s. It's very similar to Renaissance Italy, and I did love the bits in this about art and history, and I was learning so much. I had very little idea of what was happening in Vienna with their art scene, and then obviously years later when the Nazis invaded, and I didn't know about how hard it was for people to get their family heirlooms back, because if you weren't aware, the Nazis took a lot of art pieces when they were invading all of these different countries. A lot of those pieces got put in museums afterwards, but they had belonged to families before that. And it was really a fight for these families to get these family heirlooms back or get them where their family members had wanted them. And I do think that was an important bit of history to put on the table, because I had no idea that all of that had happened, but I so wish the character work had been better. Now we have my next mood read, which is Hum by Helen Phillips. This was a book of the month pick. This is speculative fiction sci-fi. We have our main character of May, who is a woman in a near future society where AI has pretty much taken over the world. AI is doing everything for us. There is the air outside, the air quality, it's not very safe. The water isn't always safe. So it is a climate ravaged world where there's a lot of AI and bad news in your face 24/7. It was very nice to read Good Talk and Hum very close together. But May is a character, how can I not root for her? She's trying to parent her children in this very crazy place. She has lost her job because AI has taken her job, and she's just trying to have a roof over the head of her children and trying to give them the best life possible in this world that is rapidly changing around them. With the atmosphere, it very much reads like this could happen in the next 50 years or so. That's a rough estimate, because, you know, back in the 1960s, they thought we would have flying cars by now, and I've yet to see a flying car in person. So I can't give you an exact estimate of when this would be taking place, but I think if you like The Substance, you're gonna like this. I personally loved the movie The Substance, and reading the first chapter in this, I was like, oh my gosh, I am totally getting those vibes, and I think this would be really fun to have a movie made out of it. Their writing style, it starts out very stream of consciousness, and that scared me at the start. I was doing the audiobook as this was a mood read for me, but that was really only in the first chapter where it's really long-winded like that. For the rest, it is pretty short chapters, but the dialogue can be long-winded at times because this is dialogue. When that happens, sometimes I get confused of who's talking after we get that for a while. I'm like, oh, where did we start with this? Who is line one? Who's line two? That can be a little confusing for me. And so I did have some confusion reading this. By the time I finished this book, I was wondering, what is the main point here? What did I miss out on here? There's a lot of talk of AI, and as I mentioned earlier, all the bad news that we're getting thrown in our face 24/7, how that cannot be good for the human psyche. Even there is discussions of plastic surgery, of mass surveillance, and being detected. I thought that was something that was very interesting. You know, on our phones, we can take a picture of a plant and it will be like, this is a whatever kind of plant. Or you can take a picture of a dog and it will be like, this is a dachshund. And this, you can pretty much take a picture of somebody's face and get a whole background of who they are. That is very intriguing. But with the climate change discussions were the ones that I found the most interesting. They go to this botanical garden that I've heard compared to the Great Wolf Lodge. I've never been to that, but if you have, that's what I've heard it compared to. And they go to the gift shop as they're leaving, and they're like, buy these stuffed animals for the money to go to serving them and rescuing them. Those stuffed animals hurts me so much to say, because y'all know I'm a stuffed animal lover. They're all made of these microplastics and fibers or whatever that when it's all said and done, they're going to end up in the landfill and causing more harm to the planet. Also, we had the children, when they have recess inside, when the air quality is too bad, they're playing a game about saving animals from an oil spill. They're playing it on a smartboard that is using a lot of energy, tremendous amounts of energy. Okay, you're playing this game using all this energy and all this AI that is just corrupting the environment that these animals are living in. It's so ironic to look at our world and see those kind of things that are happening in real time. I think this is a great depiction of where our world could end up going. We have another complicated one. This was an ebook for me, and that is Home by Marilynne Robinson. I honestly felt really dumb reading this. This is the sequel to Gillette, but really you can read these books in any order. We have 2 adult children who we have one daughter who has come back home to take care of her elderly father. And the son, he comes back to fix some wrongs that he has done in the past. I could feel for them in a situation that they were in, but I never connected with them. And with the writing, I just don't believe these characters would be talking this way. And I feel uneasy saying that because obviously Marilynne Robinson knows her characters. She was the one to write them. But just knowing the lives that they live and where they live and everything, would these characters really be having conversations like this? I'm not sure. But this book is very American, very Midwestern. It's quiet. There are a lot of important discussions. There were really big words, so I do recommend reading this on Kindle because you can hold down the word and it'll tell you the definition. But if you do read it physically or on audiobook, have a dictionary next to you because some of these words, I was just like, whoa, what does this mean? I do think there's a lot of wisdom in these pages, and I'm not going to unhaul the book because I would like to come back to this at another time in my life because I just don't think now was the right time for me to read this book, but I do think there is a lot of knowledge, experiences that I can learn from this. Now we have my very absurd weird girl book, and that is The Pisces by Melissa Broder, my second book by Melissa Broder, and I loved it. The characters in here are not going to be for everybody because they are so incredibly realistic, and I think that's going to make some people uncomfortable because Melissa Broder doesn't hold back. Her main character of Lucy in this book, she doesn't hold back. We are really getting her thoughts. This is another book that deals with stream of consciousness. We are really seeing her thoughts, and people do really think like that even if they don't want to admit it. It's true. We, in my personal opinion, we think first what society wants us to think. Second, the second thought to come to mind is how we really feel, and we're seeing that at full force in this book. But there's not a single character in this book that is okay. None of them are stable. But are any of us in real life stable? I don't think so. Again, people aren't going to want to admit that. The atmosphere, this is taking place in Southern California. It has that weird atmosphere that I loved it. I loved it. The writing, as I said, we do have some stream of consciousness, but I mainly had issues with the pacing because really great start, but in the middle, it felt like we were going in circles, and that is something I've noticed with these literary fiction, weird girl books. This one is more magical realism, that in that middle section, you're just going in circles, and life does do that. It does go in cycles. Life is repetitive, but it does get a little bit boring to read. But let me tell you, this book is very vulgar, it's very erotic and sexual, and it's not going to be for everybody. I want y'all to read the first paragraph of this book. You can look up a sample online, or if you're in the library bookstore, just open it up, and when you read that first paragraph, you will know if this book is for you or not. It's that defining, I guess. You will know if this is for you or not. It's very grotesque. And it's so out there that it made me laugh out loud, where I was just like, what in the world am I reading? But I loved that experience, honestly, because I never knew where Melissa Broder would go. I would have theories of where the book would go, and it would go in a completely different way. But there was a lot of logic here, believe it or not. It makes so much sense for this, how we got from point A to point B and how we got there with the character arcs makes complete and total sense. But really, we are seeing a woman who has gotten out of a 10-year relationship, and she is trying to find herself after said relationship. And I think it's a really powerful story of finding out who you are without a partner, without love and lust, and finding yourself. It's a beautiful thing. We do have my nonfiction pick of the month, and that was Lotharingia, A Personal History of Europe's Lost Country by Simon Winder. This was my least favorite book that I read this month. I really struggled. It put me in a short little slump. I struggle to call it a slump because it really wasn't that long, but over the weekend I did not want to read because it was just taking me so long to get through. When it said personal history, this is me being dumb, I guess, I thought it was going to be a personal history of the countries that make up what was once Lotharingia, but no, it is the author's personal experience traveling to these places. This would be a great travel book if you are planning to visit this part of the world. You are going to learn a lot. We are going from the time of the end of the last ice age all the way to the Second World War. Very sad ending of seeing how these countries had to grow back after the war and just this dispersal of people. Very sad. However, the author never felt too sure about what he was writing. He's very humble, very witty, and he'd be like, this book is going on far too long. I'm spending too much time on this. Putting those words in the book. That felt like hearing a pilot being like, I'm unsure about flying this path, but I'm going to do it anyway. Nobody wants to hear that. If I'm reading a nearly 500-page book, I don't want to hear that the author isn't confident in what he's doing. And I would have a hard time understanding what the author was trying to say. At times I'm like, I think I got this, but I'm not really sure if I got it or not. I don't want that confusion when you're reading nonfiction of historical facts and how the economy and just culture has changed over thousands of years. I want it to be 100% fact. I don't want to be confused. The short story collection that I finished most recently was Be Icebergs by Katia Adai. It was translated from the Spanish by Rosalind Harvey. This was looking at families and how a lot of time with families, you just get the tip of the iceberg. You could be like, okay, the dad's not around, or there's 5 kids. You never really get what's underneath. Like, okay, why isn't the dad around? Or are all these kids biologically related? Are they step siblings? Whatever. And this is really just showing that. And just how weird some dynamics are with family. This writing style was very unique. And it was hard for me at first. But you definitely do adjust, and every story is not written the same. I do think this is a good collection, and I love what it's trying to do. I just don't see myself rereading it in the future. Next, we have my favorite book of the month, and that is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. Yes, I have sunscreen and bug spray all over the book, but like my friend said, Britney wouldn't mind. She understands the country lifestyle. We need those things to survive in the South. This one I did not expect to be as moving and as wise as it was. And I don't know why I didn't expect that, because Britney has been through a lot in her life. It was very spiritual, and just seeing her connection with God and how that has changed and varied. And it can be however you view God. I really like how she talked about that. But how she, at the end of the day, had to save herself. And that is a theme I've come across in the Pisces, and then in the next book I'm going to read, that you can't wait for a boyfriend or for money or whatever to save you. At the end of the day, you have to save yourself. And that was something that I love about Britney, is that if she ever wanted to do something, she was going to get off her butt and do the damn thing. Whether that was living the dream of getting to perform. She says she's not good with fame. She loves to perform, putting that sweat out there on the dance floor, but doing the interviews, the paparazzi, no, that's not for her. And then the other thing was getting herself out of the conservationship, and she said she wouldn't be able to do that without the fans, but she had to be the one to make the phone call. It's so moving and powerful. It really made me feel seen was the representation of social anxiety, where Britney can perform on stage in front of thousands of people, but get her one-on-one in a room, she's like, where's the exit? I need to know that if I need to get out of here, scared out of her mind. And oh my gosh, I relate to that so much. I do these videos that tens of people watch every week, but get me in person, I am a nervous wreck. I might look like a B word, like I might just look like I'm standoffish, but no, I'm really just scared out of my mind, scared to go up to people, scared they're going to be judging me. So reading these chapters has made me realize things about myself that I hadn't known before. And that's one of the powerful things about reading, is finding yourself in books. And I love that I was able to see that. But Brittany is a very relatable person. She grew up in Louisiana and Mississippi, and reading this, I felt like she could be somebody that I know, somebody from my own small town in the South that was just read like somebody you could know. We see a lot of discussion of how male celebrities are treated versus female celebrities. I can think of bands like Motley Crue who were doing hard drugs, partying, abusing women, doing sexual things. Nobody really bats an eye. They're like, that's the rock and roll lifestyle. Okay, Brittany, who has never done hard drugs, she is not an alcoholic, but she went through this really hard time after her divorce in a custody battle with the father of her children. That's why she shaved her head, because she was not able to see her children, and she was just so stressed that she had to do something, and that's what she did, and it pains her to think about that time of her life. Nobody gave her grace. Her parents didn't give her grace. The media definitely didn't. Sarah Silverman, I'm looking at you. Questions she was getting asked in interviews about, do you think you're a bad mother? She had just put out an album, and nobody was asking her, what is it like to put out an album now that you're a mother? Is that going to change anything in your career path? No, they were just asking her about partying and if she thought she was a bad mom. I just think that's so rude and uncalled for. She was going through an awful time in her life and nobody gave her grace. There's like, oh, that's rock and roll. Why? Why is there such a divide in that? I do not understand, and I feel for her so much. And the conservationship was very fascinating as well. She's like, y'all are telling me I'm unwell, but you're sending me on sitcoms, on talk shows, world tours, Las Vegas residencies, but I'm unwell? Like, what is the logic? Oh, that was very interesting, because I've never, I knew she was in one, but I didn't know too much about it. But I want to give Brittany a hug. She is one of the famous people that I would really like to meet, and saw a lot of relatability. For the last book, we have one that I finished yesterday and was the one to cause the kind of ruckus on Reddit. And that is Annie by Sierra Greer. This was my mood read over the weekend. It also got some sunscreen on it. I'm protecting myself from the sun. With the characters in here, we have Annie, who is a robot, which in this world they are called Stellas. For the female Stellas, there are 3 options. You have one that can be a nanny. You have an Abigail, which is somebody who does housework, the cleaning, cooking, that kind of thing. And then you have the Cuddle Bunny. And the Cuddle Bunny is to provide an intimate relationship to its owner. Now, you can change between the settings, because the character of Annie did start out as an Abigail and then became a Cuddle Bunny. She belongs to Doug, who Doug made her into his liking physically, and then the robot will learn. He trains the robot. So Doug is misogyny put in the form of a person, essentially. These characters are really here for the sake of the plots, themes, and ideas to be presented, which that's fine. But I didn't have a strong emotional connection to the characters. I did get really immersed in Annie's shoes at times, where I was thinking the same things that she was thinking, and I have a lot of sympathy for her and what she was going through. And Doug, I either hated him or just didn't care about him. My connection with the characters was really ebb and flow. There wasn't a consistency to it, and I'm somebody who thrives on consistency. Now, this is listed as a sci-fi, but that did not really play a huge part into in the story. The author has mainly written sci-fi stories in the past under a different name. I don't think this needed to be a science fiction story to get the same point across. That being said, the atmosphere didn't play a huge part. Now, I can see this taking place in the same world as Hum and The Substance, because it is a very near future society, and I can definitely see our society going here. I'm sure y'all have heard about people having relationships with the AI chatbots. This is kind of amplifying that. I'm putting those chatbots in the form of what looks like a human. I do think that is extremely realistic and something that we could see happen in the future, but the author didn't play around with the setting too much. Honestly, I didn't know we were in New York City till the halfway point in the book. And then at the last quarter, we get a lot, like the Knicks get mentioned, Manhattan and different roads, like the George Washington Bridge. We randomly get all of that at the end of the story. I don't know why that is. The writing was very long. I do think this book could have been 100 pages shorter. I wish it had been edited down, because I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm bored. It's just going on and on. And again, we get a lot of circles in the middle of the book. that it really, after we have one of our big like climaxes in the story, after that it got boring, and it seems that a lot of people thought the same way that I thought about that. But with the plot, this is really showcasing being in an abusive relationship and how hard it is to get out of that, and even how sexual assault can have the impacts on that relationship, and how assault and toxicity, how it can eat a person alive. You're trying to be perfect for that person, and everybody else thinks that person's like a great person, and you're like, everybody thinks that, so what's wrong with me? I do think that was very powerful. I think this plot is extremely powerful, and exploring just how hard it is to get out of a toxic relationship. I just wish I would have connected with the characters more, and that the writing, that this had been edited down. I did complete one puzzle this month, and that was Glow in the Dark Ocean Illuminated. This was a 500-piece puzzle for my favorite brand of Mod Puppy, my friend Marquise. He got me this puzzle, and I did have a lot of fun with it. As you can see, this was kind of hard at places, like this little guy down here, the ones with the spots, but that was so fun to put together. And then these pink, there's a lot of pink, and having to find out, okay, where does this pink go, which kind of pink does it match with. So I did have a lot of fun with this puzzle. I don't want to say very easy to put together, but I did go through it quite quickly. But those little spots, the little spotted parts, they were difficult, but I do recommend this. I don't really know about the glow in the dark part because I never really saw it lit up like that, so for my case that didn't really work. But I don't really mind if it's glow in the dark or not. I'm here to do a puzzle. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it all the way through, leave a rain emoji in the comments below. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. I'll see you in my next one. Bye! If you are familiar with my videos, you're used to seeing Sherman at the end of them. Sadly, Sherman has since passed away, but I would still like to encourage you guys to help your local shelters. Sherman was at the Darlington County Humane Society in rural South Carolina. I always have their link down below in the description if you guys would like to help them, but also help your local shelters as well. You can do that by donating, sharing posts like this one, volunteering, fostering, and adopting, which it's great to do all of those things. Great to help your community, great to help the animals in your community, and I cannot recommend it enough. All of my pets were rescues, they were strays or from animal shelters, and I love them so much, and I know how much love they can give, so knowing these pets at the shelter can equally give that much love, it's amazing. And y'all should totally take part and help out those local animal shelter pets, and please help them.